recording. And now the record is on. I think the first thing I'll do is to stop the transcription, and then I need to ask you if you can hear my voice loudly and clearly. Can you hear my voice? Is my voice coming through? So I can't hear anything from the 3 students.
Sir, please, we can hear you.
Okay, that's fine. That's good. So let's move on. We need to attack the issues straight away. In our last class, we ended by discussing various problems with definitions. We had seen various ways in which definitions could be problematic. Today we are looking at types of discourses, and we shall also see types of disagreements. Types of disagreements. So let's begin with this. What is a discourse? Sometimes when we write, we put individual sentences together for different purposes. A collection of sentences is called a passage or discourse. So a discourse is basically a collection of sentences. Now, we shall distinguish passages that are arguments and those that are not. So the bottom line is to know which passages are argumentative and which passages are not. And if the passage is not an argumentative, then what other kind of passage is it? Now, argument. A discourse is called an argument if it contains a claim or conclusion that is supported with reasons or information. So a passage that is an argument is one that contains a conclusion which is supported with reasons. So basically, those are the two things. An argument contains only 2 items or components, a conclusion and then expressions aimed at providing support or proof for the conclusion. So those are the 2 components of an argument. To know if a passage is an argument, first of all, there must be a conclusion somewhere. And then there must be reasons being given for the conclusion. These 2 things are indispensable for making up an argument. Example of argument. So here we have 3 statements. Statement 1. Ghanaian men think women don't deserve to occupy high positions. That's statement 1. 2. They question the competence and qualification of women who are sent to high office, but refrain from doing same to even incompetent men. That's 2. And then 3. Therefore, Ghanaian men do not respect women. Now, so these are 3 statements. One of them is a conclusion, and then the other 2 are the reasons being given for the conclusion. Now, so if you look at them, you should be able to tell which one is the conclusion. Because the conclusion normally sounds like, a general claim, a generalized kind of claim, or rather, well, it's not always generalized, sometimes it could be particular, but the conclusion always sounds like a claim or a position or a stand. And then when you see the premises, what they are doing is to explain, provide reasons, supply evidence, provide information. That's what they do to help you to believe in the conclusion. Now let's read on. Notice that the above passage has 3 statements. Statements 1 and 2 are serving as information, evidence, or reasons to support statement 3. For attempting to support statement 3, these statements are called premises. Premises. Statement 3, which is being supported, is called conclusion. So that basically is the infrastructure of an argument. Now the next thing is, how do we identify arguments? Identifying arguments is a skill. The first thing about identifying arguments is that there are certain words or phrases that tell you you are looking at an argument. First of all, there are certain words or phrases that tell you you are looking at a premise. And there are also certain words and phrases that tell you are looking at a conclusion. Now, those kind of words and phrases that tell you are looking at a premise, they are called premise indicators. And those words and phrases that tell you are looking at a conclusion, you call them conclusion indicators. Now, here we have some premise indicators. Normally, some of these indicators start at the beginning of the sentence. So when a sentence begins, for instance, with the word for there were this and that, for this, for acts, it performs the same function as because. When you see that, then you are looking at a premise, because that sentence is providing reasons for what was said in another sentence. Or you see some other words and phrases such as granted that, in view of the fact that, inasmuch as, since it is a fact that, one cannot doubt that, because the reason is that. Now, so the phrase "the reason is that" is the most direct kind of premise indicator. And then you have the last one, as shown by the fact that, another such premise indicators. Then you have conclusion indicators. These words and phrases will tell you are looking at a conclusion. When you see therefore at the beginning of a sentence, therefore, or probably at the beginning of the second half of a sentence, consequently, hence, asserting that, for this reason, accordingly, consequently, this being so. So these tell you you're looking at the conclusion. Now, you can substitute, you can take any of these premise or conclusion indicators and then insert them in the example of an argument we saw. So let's go back to the argument. You can take a premise indicator and insert into statements 1 and 2. So you can, for instance, take granted that, or in view of the fact that. So you say, granted that Ghanaian men think women don't deserve to occupy high positions, or in view of the fact that Ghanaian men think women don't deserve to occupy high positions. And granted that they question the competence and qualification of women who are in high offices. That you can then say that Ghanaian men do not respect women. So you can phrase it in any of these ways, or in any way you can. So that is how the indicators work. But you must not always identify an argument with an indicator. In fact, most arguments don't have any indicators. Indicators are just extra decorations, They are not necessary. They are not a necessary part of the sentences. They don't have any work to do. They just make it look more expressive, like putting flowers on top of a table, just something like that. So they are not necessary. You have to learn to identify arguments without any indicators. And of course, you would not see any indicators when you are dealing with arguments in your examination. Then we have non-arguments. Not every passage or cluster of propositions is an argument. Some passages are non-arguments, including narratives, instructional passages, or rhetorical polemic. Now let's look at the three of them, beginning with narrative. A narrative is a passage that reports a sequence of events a passage that reports a sequence of events according to the order the events occurred. So a passage that reports a sequence of events, that tells you that a narrative is a collection of factual statements, something like that. A collection of factual statements that forms the structure of a story, so a narrative is like a story. Example, over the course of 2 weeks, some police officers have been observed stopping and checking cars in the area between Nsawam and Anyinam on the Accra-Kumasi road. They extort money and abuse motorists who question their authority. Branding AK-47 assault rifles and dressed in heavy police gear, these officers do not just check cars, they also assault some motorists and passengers. So, in summary, this is a narrative. It's a collection of, factual statements that are organized to present a sequence of events, which technically tells you it's like a story. Then you have instructional passage. Instructional passage is a passage that describes a process or sequence of things to do in a specific order. It offers a list of directives to follow to accomplish some desired effects. So a passage, a instructional passage, is basically a collection of imperatives. A collection of imperatives. Imperatives that have been designed or arranged in an order to show you or to guide you through a process. That's instructional passage. Now let's read them. The example below offers a list of directives on how to use a fire extinguisher. Example, pull the pin, aim the nozzle at the base of the fire. Aiming at the top of the flame with the extinguisher won't be effective. In a controlled manner, squeeze the trigger to release the agent. Sweep the nozzle from side to side until the fire is put out. So this is a collection of imperatives that have been arranged in order to show you or guide you through how to manipulate a fire extinguisher. Rhetorical polemic. This is a passage communicating a usually strong feeling and persuasively vents an opinion. So a passage that communicates feeling, expressing feelings, that's emotive expression. So a rhetorical polemic would be a collection of emotive expressions. Technically, that's what it should be. A collection of emotive expressions. Because we had earlier said that emotive expressions are, expressions that, demonstrate, show feelings. So let's look at an example. I hate these lab tests. That's an emotive expression. Every time I'm exposed to the disease plants, I fall ill. That's like a claim. Okay, so the second sentence is a claim. I'm sure they hate me or they're punishing me or something. That's an emotive expression. It's disgusting how I get sick so often. That's an emotive expression. So you have about 4 emotive expressions, and then there is also a claim. So a rhetorical polemic would be a passage communicating strong feeling, or you can also say it's a collection of emotive expressions which can often contain a claim or claims. So I think the central definition is that it's a passage that communicates strong feeling. Now let's do a little exercise. Name 4 types of discourses studied in this chapter. 4 types of discourses. So let's begin with how many people do we have here? Right now we have 13 people. Jonathan Afriye, can you give us 4 types of discourses? Unless you didn't arrive on time. Jonathan. And whilst Jonathan is preparing, Ajman Gertrude, can you name 4 types of discourses? Daniel Ade, can you help us out there. Okay, so it's very likely that you guys were not around at the beginning. So 4 types of discourses. You have argument, narrative, instructional passage, and rhetorical polemic. What is an argument? An argument is a passage that contains a conclusion that is supported with reasons. A conclusion that is supported with reasons. List the components of an argument. So we've just listed them. A conclusion and then premises. Conclusion and premises. Premises offering reasons for the conclusion. Distinguish between argument and rhetorical polemic. Now, an argument is a passage containing a conclusion supported with reasons, whilst a rhetorical polemic is a passage communicating strong feeling or a collection of emotive expressions, which could sometimes include a claim or claims. So that's the difference between the two. In an argument, you need to support what you are saying, the conclusion or claim you are making, with reasons. But for emotive expressions, there's no support. You can make a claim, but you can just accompany it with emotive expressions. So claims, accompanied by emotive expressions. That's a rhetorical polemic. Okay, so that's the end of the 4 types of discourses. Now we're going to look at types of disagreements. Types of disagreements. Now, in logic or critical thinking, we talk about several areas of critical thinking. Now, critical thinking is very vital for several areas of life, including making arguments, participating in a disagreement, participating in a debate, doing your research, taking a decision, reflecting about issues, and everything that requires some form of logic. So among all these, arguing and disagreement is one of them. And so we want to look at disagreement, but we have to start by distinguishing 2 types of disagreement. 2 types of disagreement. You have the verbal disagreement and the substantive disagreement. Now, the verbal disagreement is usually not regarded as a real disagreement. It is only the substantive disagreement that is regarded as a real disagreement. Now, verbal disagreement or verbal dispute is a disagreement about the meaning of a word or words. So it's a disagreement that arises because someone doesn't understand a word properly. So if the person is made to understand what a word or some words truly means, then the argument disappears, the disagreement disappears. So that's why it's called a verbal disagreement. And logicians don't normally give it the status of a real disagreement. Now, example of verbal disagreement. That man is a Fanti, and then someone says, no, he's not a Fanti, he's an Akan. That man is a Fanti, no, he's not a Fanti, he's an Akan. Now, this disagreement arises because the second person doesn't understand that a Fanti is an Akan. Once you make the person understand that a Fanti is an Akan, then the argument disappears or evaporates. Second example, she's a Christian because she receives Holy Communion. No, she's not a Christian because she does not speak in tongues. Now, this argument is arising, or disagreement is arising, because of disagreement about what being a Christian means. The first person thinks that being a Christian is to receive Holy Communion, and the second person says no. The first, being a Christian doesn't mean receiving Holy Communion, but speaking in tongues. So the issue of what it entails to be a Christian is to be settled before you can settle this argument. So it's ultimately an argument about meaning, what it means to be a Christian. When you have the real dispute, which is substantive disagreement about facts or values, real or substantive disagreement or dispute is about facts or values, not about meaning. So, example of disagreement about facts: Accra is the capital of Ghana. No, Kumasi is the capital of Ghana. That's a factual disagreement. Now, this kind of disagreement may not take place in Ghana, but this disagreement can take place in China or Russia or even America, where some of them don't know the capital of Ghana. Now, how do you resolve a factual disagreement? You resolve it by cross-checking or verifying the facts. Verifying, cross-checking, or confirming the facts. Then, example of disagreement over values. Accra should be the capital of Ghana. No, Accra should not be the capital of Ghana. So in that case, there's a disagreement about what should be or what should not be, and that's a disagreement about values or preferences. Now, how do you settle a disagreement over values? It wouldn't be as easy as settling a factual disagreement. To settle an agreement over values, you first of all need to begin to research the values of the people who are disagreeing, to see why and how those values differ. And then from there, you want to find out how, if the values can converge at all. If the values cannot converge, then the disagreement remains. So settling value disagreement is not as easy as settling factual disagreements. Okay, so a little exercise. Determine whether the following disagreement is verbal or real. Determine whether the following disagreement is verbal or real. Sandra says that man is quite old. He died at 50. And then Comfort says, you call that old? He died young. Is this a verbal or a real disagreement? So you guys would.
Verbal.
Verbal. Oh, so why do you think it's verbal?
So because it looks like Sandra and Comfort are having a misunderstanding about the meaning of the word old. So they are disagreeing. Sandra thinks to be old, when you are age 50, it means you are old. But then Comfort thinks age 50 is still young. So it's not, that means the person is not old when the person gets to age 50 for her.
Yes, so I think that summarizes all that I would have said on this question. So you can take all she has said as what I would have said. So it's a conflict about the meaning of the word old, or what it entails to be old. So that means if the meaning or the entailment of the word old is in contest, then it is technically a verbal disagreement. So that brings us to the end of today's class. I'm going to have to upload this video so that those who didn't come will get to watch it. And that is the advantage and the joy of online classes, And at this point, if anyone has any questions, the person should ask so that we attend to it. And when we've done so, we start uploading the recording. So does anyone have any questions? Frank.
Sir, you gave an example about a man being a fancy and the other one disagreeing. I don't really remember that example, but it was about someone being a fancy.
Yes, and
Yeah.
someone saying that no, it's not a fancy, it's an account.
Yeah, so can that one also be a factual disagreement, a real disagreement?
No, it cannot be real because they are disagreeing about whether a font is an account or not. And whether a font is an account or not is a question about the meaning of what it is to be a fancy.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Yeah, so this lecture was quite short because the topic is not really much. And so now I'll have to start uploading. But before I begin to upload, I would have to stop the recording. And before I stop the recording, I would wish you guys a happy weekend. And until our next class, please read your textbooks, do your exercises, and I encourage you to be serious in the things you do as students so that you reap the benefits later. So now I'm stopping the recording and I'm